Anglers of the internet, welcome back to another show, Advanced Kayak Angler. I'm your host, Kurt Smits, and this show is going to be about fishing jerkbaits. And I have got probably two of the best jerkbait kayak fishermen out there. Let's just bring them on. I don't really have anything to say besides this is Adam.
Hi,
this is Rolando. Guys, welcome to the show.
All right. Happy to be here, guys.
Yep. Thanks, Smitty. No,
we miss
pleasure being here.
There he is.
Yep. I'm here.
So there's Rolando.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on tonight. Guys, jerkbait's one of those baits that I feel like it's kind of like the spinner bait. I feel like it was really popular a while ago, and then it's kind of fallen off the radar a little bit, especially I feel like with forward-facing sonar, which I use it with the forward-facing sonar sometimes, but I feel like it's just kind of not getting as much attention as it should, or really as powerful of a bait as it is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who goes first here, but I mean, I have it year round, and I'll be honest, like I think I started using the jerkbait for quite a bit, probably in 2016, and then I can't remember when LifeScope came out, but the wife bought it for me for Christmas. I didn't even know it was a thing until she bought it for me, and then I realized the power of the jerkbait after I combined it with the LifeScope. And so it was a fish catcher, easily get fish in the boat. Caught a lot of little fish with it when you were kind of just throwing it around, beating it on the bank and throwing it on points, throwing it around structure, right? It was really good around docks, things like that that you can just kind of get it in and out. But the minute that you were able to kind of visually see what was going on underneath, then you could start messing with the jerkbait, sinking it, and you can actually watch it so you can put it in precise spots underneath that surface. I mean, that was game changing, because holy moly, it was catching. I went from catching, little dinks and 2-3 pounders to all of a sudden targeting 8, 9, 10 pounders. You know what I mean? And you were just triggering these fish. So it's gone through its ups and downs. I think a lot of people started fishing it a lot, and so now I feel like it's not as effective as it was between 2016 and 2020, I think. So because more people are using it, but it absolutely still is very effective. You just you got to have an eye for things. When you can introduce it, when you know that the fish are maybe seeing too many of them. And then you got a lot of things you can play with, right? Sinking them, different colors, different brands. There's definitely brands that work better than others.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially depending where you're at in the country, too. I feel like some brands play in more than others.
Right.
It's hard for me to say where to start with the jerkbait. It's one of my absolute favorite things, and I'm in Middle Tennessee. I'm in the Nashville area. We do not freeze over here, but before I really learned what a jerkbait does, I learned that it was a cold water bait, and the lakes were before forward-facing sonar, it was tough to get bit in the wintertime, dead of winter here. We would do river floats on some of the rivers around here in the Nashville area. And I didn't want to fish slow. I didn't want to have to do the super slow stuff, to slow down your typical winter stuff that was preached to you for bass fishing. I wanted to still throw my hands. I don't like my hands cold, and so I could throw a jerkbait, be moving around, moving my body a little bit with it. It's an action bait. So, and I got results in a hurry catching smallmouth. And I quickly learned that it's one of those baits. It's special. It's separate from other things. It's kind of like a glide bait where I feel like it has the capabilities to hypnotize fish. I've seen fish lose their mind on a jerkbait when they probably wouldn't have gone for anything else. It compels the fish to react, unlike very, very few other baits, to the point where after a few years of throwing it, I dedicated a rod and reel setup just for that and I'm pretty budget friendly and don't have a lot of high end rods and reels. But when I saw the power of that jerkbait, I was like, I need to have a setup to where it's just permanently jerkbait, good to go.
Yeah.
And now that I'm a couple years in the live scope, I don't know that unless I'm in like just a muddy swamp, which Rolando can talk about catching a fish out of a swamp on a jerkbait here in a bit. But it just stays with me. It's such a powerful tool, such a powerful lure. I can't say I throw it during in the hot of the summer. I'm usually leaning on other stuff, but pretty much 3/4 of the year, especially the coldest time, I'm taking one out. It's one of the most powerful things I've ever seen.
I feel like too, if the water's clear enough, it has that drawing effect. Like,
yep.
You don't have to be right on top of the fish. You can actually pull a fish out from a weed line or some structure or off of a point that's a little ways away, because they're coming out and checking out whatever this weird thing is that's moving and then stopping.
Well, I think clear water obviously is it definitely has drawing power, but I will tell you that my biggest fish was out from where that little water's got a little bit of stain. And it's only because when you combine live scope and jerk baits, you can put it right on the head. You know what I mean? And so you can easily fool them a little bit more than you can the clear water. I feel like the clear water before wasn't you really couldn't tell the difference as much. There's just a lot more fishing pressure these days.
Yeah.
So that clear water, it's a little bit harder, as I'm starting to find out, it's a little bit harder on the clear water to catch the bigger fish. I think you can still catch a bunch of the buckfish, especially if you're in the river system. Like, holy moly, if you got moving water, that jerkbait is deadly. Because if you got moving water and you got that surface being disruptive and you don't have that stable water where they can look at it really good, man, they're going to make that mistake and they're going to strike at it, because if they're in that feeding mode, they're going to go after it. So river systems, absolutely. Problem is you got to be really good, because river systems, a lot of times you have a lot of debris, a lot of things, so it's not very easily fished. Yeah. But if you can figure out a way to fish it and get around all that stuff, man, you can really trigger some big fish bites for sure. And I change my hooks. I don't know about Adam. It depends on the situation, but like I like Megabass because I have the best luck with Megabass. But man, those hooks, man, you could probably use them one time, but if you start getting into that 7-8 pound range, and you're around structure, it can get a little iffy if those hooks can hold on. So yeah, you can catch a lot of little fish with the stock hooks, but I definitely do swap out my hooks on a lot of baits.
I'll swap those out too, because like most people or most guys that do a lot of jerkbait fishing, that Megabass is going to be in your arsenal if it's not your main thing. And it is my main lure, like any number of different Megabass jerkbaits. I don't mind practicing or fun fishing with the stock hooks.
Right.
I'm okay with that, because any hooks I'll switch them out to may get dulled or rusted in times. I want to be a little frugal and not put them all till tournament day. But I will use those hooks that come on a Megabass jerkbait and put them on like blade bait or something else that may need changing out hooks. It's not as important. It doesn't have to do with buoyancy or anything like that. So I'll still reuse those hooks, but tournament day, yeah, they're getting swapped out. In my opinion, as far as treble hooks go on any baits in my tackle box, my sharpest hooks in my tackle box need to be my jerkbait hooks, because as we know, a bass will eat that jerkbait when it's completely static, completely still. And it may just be literally nibbling it to where we don't even, especially if we're not looking at it on forward facing, it may be nibbling at that thing, and that hook still needs to get caught on its cold, dense mouth. So sharp hooks, boy, that's important. Big deal.
I can't agree with you more, Adam. The sharpness of the hooks is the most critical point on those jerkbaits, because the bigger the fish, the harder the plates on the side are. So you got to have those hooks drive right through. On the smaller fish, it's not so bad because they tend to be a little bit softer. Or if you're in like states that it's really hot, or you fish power plant lakes, they tend to have really soft mouths. But if you're up north and you're in cold water, those gill plates are hard, and you got to have hooks that drive through that. And also, the bigger the fish is, the harder the pull is going to be. So you got to have good hooks, man. And they love to shake those off. And like a lot of the times, if you don't have good hooks, they're going to jump a lot and they're going to shake those things, and they'll come off if you don't have good hooks.
What hooks do you guys like to use when you replace them?
Well, there's a few that I actually, depending on the situation, but there's some Gamakatsus that I use, that the finesse type of Gamakatsus, because of all the jerk baits, the megabass is the one that's more what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to use fragile, but it's particular, like it's delicate. Any little change will cause that thing to move different or sink. So you got to have the right size hooks for that. But I use the brand Ryugi and also Gamakatsu, and a lot of the times, as long as it's got that coating, the TC coating on it, I like. So, and you have to play with the sizes, because there's some Japanese hooks that they'll say size 4, size 7, whatever the case is. They're not equivalent to the US size. So you just have to kind of play with those and figure out, because any little change on those megabass, it's going to cause it to sink.
That's like a really good point you made there. It's like the weight of the hook matters tremendously.
It does.
Yeah. So like if you were to go get a 6 cents jerkbait, no. Or you get a Spro or something else, their buoyancy is so, like, you can change it, and the density of the hook it still won't make it sink. But megabass, it's so fine tuned that any little change, it's going to change it completely. And so you got to balance those out correctly. And when you figure that out, man, those hooks, and you combine that with live scope, because I like when I'm targeting big fish, if it's super, super cold water, yeah, I do like that jerkbait to suspend. But dying shad in cold water, they're going to sink. You know what I mean? So
they don't rise, that's for sure.
They don't rise. Yeah. So you got to you put too heavy of a hooks, it's going to sink like a rock, and it's not going to look natural. And a lot of people tell me, like, it's a debate that we have over fluorocarbon or a braid. And some people tell me, like, oh, I catch fish all the time with braid. It doesn't matter if it's fluorocarbon or braid. I'm like, yeah, but are we talking about like 1-pounders? Because like when you're talking about getting into tournament fishing and you're trying to catch a 20, 25 plus pound bag, those big fish, they look and nose their bait, and they look at it and kind of inspect their food a little bit more than the younger fish do. So yeah, I can catch 20, 30 fish with, doesn't matter what lure or line I use, but when you're targeting bigger fish, your presentation has to look good, because those fish have been around the block a few times. You know,
they're smart. When they get big, if they get big, they're smart.
Yep.
I find myself, like I said, I changed the hooks, but I have to give extra attention to every bit of my setup on my jerkbait, rod, reel, line, all of it. And I've experimented with, straight fluoro, braid to leader. And then, of course, if you do braid to leader, your rod action then has to adjust since you're, giving more power or more resistance, and how you snap a jerk bait. And if, for me, I found myself, at least right now, I like the digital reels from Shimano. I haven't found a whole lot of reasons to justify getting those versus just a regular reel, but anything where you have to cast a bait in the wind, those reels can be extra helpful. And a jerkbait's one of those. A spinnerbait's another one. A spinnerbait does not like being cast into the wind, but they bite a spinnerbait in the wind. They also bite a jerkbait in the wind really good too. So being able to, before I was using live scope, I'm fishing really clear water, a lot of highland reservoirs, and I want to make a long cast with my jerkbait. I want to reel it down to the depth that I want it to first. So that's part of the cast right there. And once it's down there, I want to be able to present it to them without seeing the line. So when I first started jerkbait fishing, it was straight fluoro. I had a lot of visual considerations as far as like I didn't want the bass to know that I was using, I'm fishing for it. And now that live scope has come into my arsenal, boy, has it completely changed things. It makes my jerkbait fishing a little more streamlined. I now use braid to leader and just use a softer rod, because if I'm jerkbait fishing now, especially the last few years, I've maybe only made less than 10 casts with a jerkbait to a fish or an object that I wasn't looking at already on forward facing. It is very much hand in hand for me using sonar with jerkbait now. It's plenty fine and effective without it, especially in clear water. It can draw fish towards it. But that setup, a braid to leader, I can use about a 6 or 7 foot leader. I feel like they're not going to be spooked by that braid unless I'm around very clear water and very pressured fish. I feel confident with that setup, and I can travel with that. I don't have to worry about the changing out fluorocarbon more regularly because it's just more efficient. But that combination and number 5 Gamakatsu hooks, I think it's the Nano Finesse or the G Finesse. I forget, whatever those ones that Rolando said that are coated. Those are definitely the best that I've found. Now I haven't gone on a hook hunt in a while. There's probably some better stuff that Japan's making that I'm not.
No, those are actually those. I would say that those are pretty equivalent to the Japanese ones that I use.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just as good.
But the whole setup to me, like if I had too stiff of a rod, I don't even the hook changes and all that doesn't matter. So it has to be. It's such a precision technique, and you can get that bite from that extra big fish. And jerkbait is a fish that'll catch the biggest fish of your life, or the biggest limit that I've ever caught, 5 largemouth, came off of a jerkbait. And so if you don't have that whole setup in a way that you're cozy with, you're just not going to land all those fish, and it's not one you want to mess up with, because it can make for the most special days in the water you'll ever have.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to agree that the setup is super crucial because, I get a lot of anglers sometimes that ask me about what my action is, and I've went through so many jerkbait rods. And I didn't like a lot of them, to be honest with you. And I ended up at a friend of mine here that builds rods. Ended up ordering me some Northport blank, and I ended up finally finding one that I actually liked that was custom made. But I have used the Shimano one that the Tactical Bassin group suggests for jerkbaits, and I have to say that was pretty close to the one that I got built that I really did like. Because I went through a bunch of them and I have lost big fish on it. And the main thing is that we're here. So like in Texas, we're used to being super aggressive, big fish, always like heavy equipment. So when you go to those finesse deals and you launch that jerkbait and you launch it out there 80, 90 feet and you get bit way out there, sometimes you feel like you don't have a good bite. And if those hooks and your setup is not right, when you get a bite in that 80, 90 feet deal, you're not going to drive those hooks enough. And the minute they jump, they toss it. Mm-hmm. So that is super crucial to have that combination. Whether you go braid to fluoro or straight fluoro, you're going to have to figure out which rod is going to like what. Because like if you're a braid to fluoro guy, that one rod that's straight fluoro is not going to work for that other combination. So you're going to have to figure out that combo to make sure that it all works together good. Because
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a little changes. And those hooks are not there. I mean, we're not talking about, it's not a big, 4-aught or 5-aught hook, right? So these little hooks, you got to get them just right. So that combination of the equipment is super crucial.
Such a fine line. I mean,
yeah.
You guys are nailing so many things that I had planned on like introducing in the conversation, because it's like so important to jerkbait fishing. the action of your rod, the type of line you're using, and for me, with jerkbait fishing, because a lot of times when I'm targeting fish for them, it's a little bit farther away from the boat than I would normally be targeting them. I need to have that rod have just enough flex so they don't pitch those little hooks, right?
Yep.
So they don't spit them. You need to keep that tension on the line, so you can't have too heavy, and then if it's too light, you're not going to drive the hooks home.
Right.
And the line depends on your rod action, right? Like if you have the straight fluoro, you're going to want a softer rod tip for sure. If you have not straight fluoro, but if you have braid to a fluoro leader, you're going to want a little softer rod tip than you necessarily would if you had all fluoro, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the, it sounds like both you guys use them on bait casters. Is that exclusively? Because I know I have a setup. I have one setup that I have for a spinning line, just so I can really bomb it out there and get these super long casts in.
Before the electronic reels with electronic brakes, those smallest jerk baits, like your 2-hook jerk baits and some of those extra light ones. Again, on a windy day, trying to make a long cast, it was a struggle, there was initially sometimes I was using the spinning setup. Now I can tie on like my smallest mega bass or a little lucky craft and still cast it with the brakes. So I haven't done a spinning setup with jerkbait in a long while, and if I have to get into some setup where I throw a jerkbait that you can only throw on that, and I haven't done the BFS stuff either, so that's
a whole nother realm, man.
Yeah, right. But no, just straight bait casters for me, or just one really.
Yeah, I carry a bait caster setup. I carry 2 jerkbait setups, right? I carry one for just regular jerkbaits and kind of like the what's smaller version of the mega bass. It's the
junior.
No, not the junior. Even smaller than that.
Okay, I know the one. I don't know the name of it, but I know the one you're talking about.
Gosh, I just drew a blank. There's a smaller one. I predominantly throw the junior. That's what I usually throw, the junior. I do throw the full-size ones, but probably about 90% of the time I'm throwing the junior. But there's a smaller one than the junior, and I still throw that one on a bait caster, but once in a while I will, depending on what I'm trying to do with it, I'll have a spinning setup that I can tie it onto, but I do throw the oversized jerkbaits, like the Kanadas. So I throw the big ones, right? That are like 6-inch.
That's huge. I think for jerkbait.
I own that one, and I haven't thrown it, but I also do not live in Texas, so.
Yeah.
Man, I'll tell you, I caught little fish that are bigger than the bait's bigger than them on that. So
I'm sure.
I will tell you, like, some of the juice that I would let on that go is that Canada on grass, holy moly. Because it floats really, really fast. Okay. So if you can fish it over grass, holy moly, it's pretty deadly.
Will you throw that big guy on like a heavier setup then? Because that's a pretty big lure.
You can't throw it on the regular.
Like 15 pound or something. I would think you'd need for that one.
Yes. As a matter of fact, depending on where I'm throwing it, I throw it up to 20 pound.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I treat it just like a glide bait, right? Because it's got trouble. You can throw it on a swim bait rod. You have much bigger hooks on that.
Mm-hmm.
So you can most definitely throw it on a glide bait type of rod. And most of the time when you're on a kayak, you're not fishing it traditionally downwards. It's kind of hard because you're not always standing. You're constantly moving. So, you talk to a boater, he's going to tell you a 6'9" rod, right? So that he doesn't have to, the water doesn't hit the tip. So on a kayak, no, I'm 7 foot all the way through. 7-foot rod on my jerk baits because I'm not worried about my tip hitting the water because most of the time I'm sitting down anyways. So I want that longer cast, and I just get it on that 7 foot. I don't go past 7 foot, but for like those bigger jerk baits that I throw, like the Canada and stuff like that, then I throw it like on a 7.3 swim bait rod.
That makes sense. And Rolando, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to take this conversation into that tangent of a topic. Is that we're fishing jerk baits from a kayak. I've noticed that to me, jerkbait fishing and punching have different considerations when we're sitting down. It's a lot tougher a lot of guys will say it's tougher to jerkbait fish. I'm fine with it. Even though I do punch sitting down, it is more difficult than it is like to stand up and do that. And at the beginning here, Kurt, you said like a lot of people don't are discouraged or don't like jerkbait fishing. I get excited when I hear that because I was like, that's one less jerkbait that those fish are going to have to see. And in my opinion, you're just missing out on a fantastic technique that really you can just kind of chuck it and snap it, and like you're still going to be giving yourself a good chance at some action. But you know, exactly what Rolando said. Traditionally, jerkbait rods are considered shorter rods. So if you're standing at the bow of the bass boat in a trolling motor, you're snapping down, you're not slapping the water with that. I too use a 7 or 7.2 jerkbait rod. Definitely nothing longer than that. I only want a little bit longer rod so I can make just that little bit of a longer of a cast if I'm sitting down. Again, now that I'm live scoping, I found that I don't need to make those bomb casts quite as much. But the just 7-foot rod sitting down is fine with me. And I'll do snaps and pulls. You know, jerkbait, you think of snap, pause, or jerk, pause. Doing little pulls too, whether it's pulls with the reel or pulls with the rod. I've had days where they won't touch a snap jerkbait, but they'll eat a pulled jerkbait, vice versa. So there's a lot of experimenting that goes on with that. But I'm fine sitting down. Do you guys get discouraged at all sitting down using a jerkbait? I'm a sit-down kayaker to begin with. The only time you'll catch me standing in a kayak is if I'm working a bed. Other than that, I really do like sitting down the entire time. What do you guys prefer as far as snapping, standing with jerkbait fishing?
Oh, I'll tell you that. I mean, most of the time, thank you. Most of the time that that I'm working with the jerkbait and it's gonna work the best is when you can't stand up. You know, that means your windy conditions, cloudy. I mean, you just got a hell of a mess on the damn on the lake, and that's when your jerkbait's gonna shine. I mean, you know, crankbaits, spinner baits, all those things. You got wind. You mix wind with jerkbaits. That's amazing. And here's the challenge with that. Most of your people are not going to want to throw a jerkbait in the wind, especially if it's super windy. You're moving too much, and if you're trying to go with the wind, your distance is gonna be closed too quickly. So you're gonna have to, you want to make that jerkbait effective in the wind, you're gonna have to cast against the wind. So you're gonna have to get a jerkbait that has a weight transfer system. You're gonna have to have a setup that you can cast a long ways against the wind. So you need a long rod, and you're gonna need some skill, and you're gonna need a good reel. I use an Aldebaran. Because for me, that's what I started with. It works great for me. It carries just, you know, I can put 12-pound test line on it, 10-pound test, whatever the case I need to do, depending on the situation. And I can cast that sucker against the wind, and it's just fine. I have not used BFS equipment, but I'm sure that'll work just fine too. So, but that is crucial. Most people are going to want a nice, calm day, and that's probably going to be the less effective day for the jerkbait.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to lie. So when I get into a situation where it's like patchy grass and I'm throwing a jerkbait, I like standing up so I can see the grass.
Sure.
Right. So I can work it right between them and change the direction. I'll be, you know, kind of pulling and tapping on one side and move to the other. But, you know, 90% of the time I'm sitting down and using it.
Yeah.
I really am, because, you know, it's windy. I'm trying to hold position. So standing up, it's just, that wrecks your position, right? I mean, especially on a windy day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But sitting down most of the time, and you know, like you guys said, I'm closer to 7 for my rods, and that's where you know, is my sweet zone for the jerkbait is just shy of 7 foot.
Okay.
So I'm not using a really super short rod, but I'm not using a super long one either. I feel like in kayak terms, for me, over 7 foot starts being long. Under 7 foot.
Yeah, most people. I mean, traditionally, people are gonna, you know, when you look at history, jerkbaits are going to be 6'8", 6'9". That's what they're going to tell you for the most part. Mm-hmm. So, but in a kayak, it doesn't matter because you're not going to be fishing and standing up most of the time anyways. So
you kind of need the longer rod.
Yeah,
A little bit longer cast because you're not standing up now. You can't really lob it out there. You have to really kind of finesse that longer rod. You know?
But even then, like jerkbait fishing is one of the most fatiguing ways to fish if you're like snapping it. And then so
Yeah.
whether you're getting into like tennis elbow talk or just like if that I've had a couple tournaments where the jerkbait is what I threw all day and didn't really throw anything else. And luckily I'd be catching them. But man, you can really go home sore or like hurting after the end of the day.
You won't realize it
jerkbait
till
fishing.
afterwards.
Yeah.
And so maybe that like thins out how many guys are going to be going all in on the jerkbait because it is such a physical technique. Some of our bass fishing techniques can like wear us out, you know. And then I get excited when the bite's on something that doesn't require a lot of physicality from me, but that is not the case with the jerkbait. If I'm throwing a jerkbait, my cast got to be on. Like it's such a detail oriented bait. But it's all kinds of considerations that go into this technique that don't apply for anything else.
Yeah.
So you guys have mentioned megabass as being like one of your favorite jerk baits. What would be number two from a different manufacturer?
Adam, I'll let you go first.
I feel like I'm only semi-qualified to answer this question because I haven't done a whole lot of playing around. I first got into jerkbait fishing when I was living in California, and it was also when I was first learning about bass fishing. So I was everything was new to me, and it was all experimental. But I first started throwing Lucky Craft pointers. It's what the guys at the tackle shop were throwing, and Lucky Craft was extra popular in California at the time when I was living out there. So those ones proved to me that, hey, I can get bites on jerkbaits when they won't eat anything else. And they're still really good baits. I'd still probably change some hardware out. I don't really care too much about split rings. I'm kind of okay with split rings unless I'm just around true trophy fish or something, but we'll change those hooks out. And man, after Lucky Craft, I kind of just jumped into Mega Bass, and that was good. I've bought a handful of 6 cents baits. They're offering a few different options that other jerkbait manufacturers aren't currently. I have not tried the Spro Mix stick, and that one has a strong reputation. I still feel bad that I haven't tried the Berkeley Stunner because that one's got an extra strong reputation too. So I feel like it's only right for me to say I haven't put in the time with those. But whenever I do grab like that 6 cents bait or something else and try to experiment, or if I'm on a straight jerkbait bite, all right, they're fading off of the bite. Let's give them a different look, a different lure. So many times they still want the mega bass. It's just a different mega bass, whether it's the junior or the one that we're referring to that we can't remember the name of. I feel like it's got an extra name of it or something. Yeah, that dude. Every time I stray away from a mega bass, even if I can get a few bites or get a little action on it, it's still, I can switch back to a mega bass and it seems like they're back on it again. So I'm looking for every opportunity I can to keep my tackle simple and not bring as much stuff with me. And I find my jerkbait bite or tackle box just being more and more mega bass saturated as time goes on. It's the truth of it. But again, I haven't done a lot of the sampling experimenting that others have.
Yeah, I think for me, number one, absolutely mega bass. I mean, I've experimented with other ones and I know they're expensive. There's just something magical about that damn mega bass. I don't know what it is, but it just catches me bigger fish. And when I'm having trouble trying to trigger fish, I throw one of those suckers in there and it's just like, it works. Then there's times that it doesn't, right? To places that it just kind of seen too much. But the Berkeley Stunner, I like it because they have a sinking version. And so I sink my jerkbaits a lot of the times. Occasionally I do have some that float, but a lot of times I have it really strategically balanced to where they're slowly sinking.
Slow sinkers.
Yeah, real slowly sinking. And so just depends on what I'm trying to do. There's, I keep some that stock, not technically stock, but I keep them to where they float, right? So, or they suspend. Suspend. They're not technically going back up. But the Stunner, there's one that they sell it, which it sinks traditionally, and I don't even have to change the equipment out. They come with actually hooks that are pretty good. So that's my number two, the Stunner. And then I've experimented with the Duo Realis,
Mm-hmm.
the re-range, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good.
Or the Jackal re-range.
The Jackal re-range. There's a Duo Realis that has a jerkbait too. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a Daiwa. There's a Daiwa one that's pretty good. It's called can't remember the name of it right now, but they sell a pretty good one that see if I can remember the name of it. But my box, if I open my box to you, it's predominantly 90% megabass,
Same.
and it's gonna, and then I'll have some stunners in there, and then that Daiwa brand, which I can't think of the name of it right now, and that's it. Those are the only three that I really kind of go to, but and I'll have the regular size megabass, and then I'll have the jerk, and then I'll have the junior, and then I'll have the Nanahan. The Nanahan's the smallest one. So, and I do throw those all on bait casters. Occasionally, the Nanahan, I do have a spinning setup that I could tie it onto it, but I really don't mess with the spinning setup too much. And then I throw it on most of the time in Texas here because our waters, we do have some clear water, a lot actually, more than people think. And but a lot of the time I'm throwing it on 12-pound test line because I'm around big fish. So I throw it a lot on 12-pound. I don't go down to the 6-8 pounds.
No.
I play with 10 or 12.
That's it. Same. I do the same. A 10 was what I had for many years, and then once live scope came into the picture, I was like, okay, I know when I'm around a little bit better.
Yeah,
I know that I'm not spooking fish, so I found myself going straight. Some good 12-pound line that you can really trust, since you do know that jerkbait fishing is going to give you opportunities to hook into XL size fish. 12-pound line seems to be good for me. And with the megabass too, as far as like their suspend or fall rate that you want to achieve, seems like that 12-pound fluoro is just a good pairing.
yeah. That 12-pound is pretty much, but I would say about 80% of the time that I throw.
That's all. That's all I use. My jerk
12-pound, yeah. I mean, I'd have to be in super clear water, open water, like, and throwing that where I'll throw 10-pound. But other than that, if it's windy, it doesn't matter. They're not going to see that line as long as you're throwing fluorocarbon, right? Or you're throwing something that's really invisible. They're not going to see it. Yeah, I usually like to throw super still water and it's calm. I've had some luck at the low light conditions, but if it's a sunny, bright day and it's slick, it's not going to be so good. I mean, can it work? Absolutely, right? But
or you'll get a lot of lookers and followers on those days. Maybe it's good for practice to draw a few fish, much like a glide bait might do out of cover. You can kind of get a head count and get a look and see, what bass may be lurking in the area, but how many that'll commit on those blue sky, non-windy days. It's definitely a big difference between the gross weather days.
So this is leading me, this whole conversation right now, to the bluebird skies, to non-committal fish. We've been talking about hard jerk baits this whole time, right?
Okay.
So when is the time to switch to a soft jerk bait? I know for myself, I'm a soft plastic junkie. I mean, I admit it. I am. I love soft plastics. I have more soft plastics than I use, always. So I'm always quick to move to it, but those conditions are exactly when I do move to it. I'll move to it on any of those days where it's like super bluebird skies, high sun. They're not committing. Like I can see them, right? You can see them on your forward-facing sonar, and they just won't commit no matter how much you change your rate of pulling, snapping, pausing. They just don't commit. That's when I switch over. Do you guys switch over to that type of bait when you see them and the fish are there, but they're just not committing? They're interested, but not committing to the bait. Do you guys switch over to a soft plastic, or what do you do at that point?
For me, if they're not committing and it's pretty soft, I do try the soft plastic, but man, I really don't throw the soft plastic until pre-spawn. It's usually when I throw it a lot of the times. But
Just in pre-spawn?
yeah, I don't really throw the jerkbait outside of the pre-spawn area too much. Well, I take that back. If there's grass and it's not matted like all the way to the top, and there's just grass around, and it's like I don't have to wait for that sucker to sink like 10 feet. You know what I mean? You can throw that thing all year round. But a lot of the times where I do find it to be more effective is during that feeding time of year, right? The fall, when they're feeding up for the winter, or when pre-spawn area. So when I usually find myself using the soft jerkbait a lot, and I'm around grass, because a lot of the times I like to kind of let it get in there and pop it out. They kind of,
especially that grass that's topping out in places
Yep.
real bad, so you can kind of get through it.
Yeah, it's definitely always in a shallow area when I'm using it. It's not definitely deep. Now the hard jerkbait, that's all depths. I mean, I've sunk jerkbaits all the way down to 20 feet. You know what I mean, on the brush pile. So that is different. Your soft jerkbait is going to be shallow. That's how I use it. Yeah, I always use it shallow, and it's
almost a top water. Almost.
Yeah.
For me, anyway. For me, it's almost a top water. Because as soon as you put a weight on it, it's no longer really a jerkbait. It becomes a Texas rig, right? I mean, you still kind of work it like a jerkbait. You can work it on the bottom like one.
So Millie can kind of expose this, right, using the lead wire, right? So I was using that way before he even talked about it. So I would use I would use lead wire, and I would wrap right below the eyelid of like a straight worm hook, right? I would wrap the lead wire on the top of the eyelid all the way down to where it kind of does the band. And then I put like a little bit of glue, right? So it holds that. And then that would be my weight, right? And it would give the nose of the soft jerkbait a kind of a dip, and you can use it, but it wasn't a ton of weight, and it wasn't a weight fluctuating on the line, right? Going up and down. So that lead wire is more something that people are using these days a lot more often. And, but that's something that you could use to get down the soft jerkbait a little bit more, especially if you're fishing grass. I don't find that jerkbait is very effective, the soft jerkbait, unless it's a super, super shallow flat. Like it has to be a really shallow flat, or it's grass around. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't work the same way as a hard jerkbait. It doesn't have the same it
has its place, right? It's not a competitor to the hard jerkbait. It's just another. It's
another tool.
It's another tool.
Yeah.
And they're so different, right? I mean, you go from 2 to 3 trebles to single offset worm hook, basically, right?
Yeah, in my mind, and the way that I use both a soft jerkbait, when I say a soft jerkbait, usually if I'm talking about that, I'm saying, I was throwing a fluke. And for me, it's either a fluke or a caffeine shad. I don't really stray from those two. But even though you have a soft jerkbait and then a regular hard jerkbait, they're still completely different in my mind and my approach. And seasonally, they tend to make appearances in different times too. I literally can't think of one instance where I was like, oh, the hard jerkbait bite's not working. Let's go immediately over to a fluke or something like that. Maybe I should, because there are enough similarities. You can make a very strong point for it. But for me, I'm using the fluke in a lot of the same areas that I would just use a Senko. Maybe just to cover water a little more quicker than just a wacky rig Senko or something. But a lot of my fluke time, like Rolando said, has come around grass along the end of summer or in fall when pressured fish are a lot harder to get their attention and get them to commit to baits. And it seems like a fluke and a Senko are just tried and true bite getters, even if you got to slow down a little bit. At Cayuga Lake last year, I think I got 5th on the Hobie tournament up there, and that was with a fluke. And that was completely different than I'd ever fished with the jerkbait. I had the dead stick in 11 foot of water weightless. So it was a very slow, patient thing, dragging that all the way back to the boat. And nothing in that presentation was anything like the one of Mega Bass Vision 110. So you could say soft jerk bait, hard jerk bait, but it's a completely different thing, at least for how I fish and how I think of what do I want to offer the fish next if they're not eating one over the other. But grass, it seems like grass is always grass under the surface, especially grass that is not topped out. And here in Middle Tennessee, we don't have much of that at all. In the back in the day, you had to go to Kentucky Lake to get it. Now you got to go down to Gunnersville or Chickamauga, but even Chickamauga is a little limited as far as there's not just grass from dam to dam on that one. But I get excited when I look in, like I'll be going to Florida here in a couple weeks. And you better believe that jerkbait is going to get a lot of action down there for me. That's where I caught my big bag last year, biggest bag I've ever caught, and it was all on a jerkbait. And so I'm excited to get to some grass that's just underneath the surface, even if I got to hold the rod tip high, because maybe, what does a mega bass from Vision 110 get down to? 4 to 6 foot, give or take, right? But if the grass is topping out at 4 foot, I may have to keep that rod tip high and almost snap up or, pull it up to where it's not digging down with the bill. So I may have to modify my actual retrieve, whether I'm reeling it or pulling it or snapping it.
Or throwing a bigger line size. In that situation, you could get away with a bigger line size.
15 or something. Again, too, we're fishing Florida. That's an extra good excuse because, it's not the crystal clear stuff that I'm fishing around, so they're not going to see it as much. I was even thinking the same thing, Rolando. I'll probably tie up a 15-pound leader when I head down there, and that way, at least when I hook into that stupid gar that I thought was the bass of a lifetime, I can maybe get that mega bass bait back.
Oh, yeah. I've done that plenty of times in Florida. Yep.
Just so everyone listening knows, that was some juice because this is going to come out before Florida. So there was a little bit of juice if you're going down to Florida on what kind of baits that some of the top guys are using.
You need to have that in a trap. Boy, it seems like largemouth like eating both around any kind of dense grass.
Yeah.
My buddy in practice whacked him on a trap right in front of me, and I was just awestruck. I was just like, oh.
So trap fishing can have a lot of that like wow factor that a jerkbait does too, where it seems like it can trigger a bite out of a bass even if it didn't want to eat it. And there's a lot of comparisons and similarities that can be made between the two, but there's something about that, like that, and then that stutter, that stop that both those baits do, that it makes those bass just go nuts when they maybe normally wouldn't have it all. I don't know what it is, but I like it.
Yeah. I use I'm a big fan of the trap too. It's funny. I wonder if that's a common denominator, right, between jerkbait fishermen, right? Because the trap is something I love in the grass, and you got to rip that sucker out, man. Like I love.
I wish I had more opportunity in Middle Tennessee. Like I said, like we got lots of rock and we got lots of moving water, but the one thing that you can kind of say we don't have a lot of in abundance is that grass. You got to drive 2.5 hours to Gunnersville for me to get around that thick grass. And whereas like in Texas, especially East Texas, you can go in any direction and you're going to get some good vegetation.
Yeah.
So what are we all missing? What's the one thing you guys think that the average or above average guy who's looking at jerkbait fishing is going to miss when he looks at trying to get better at it?
Just try to keep it above the fish's head. And again, you don't have to be looking at it on a forward-facing sonar. I can't recall hardly any bites when I'm looking at them on the sonar. I can see the bite go down in real time where the fish came down and ate it from that. It seems like you want to keep it above your fish or your target, whatever that is. At bare minimum, at least the same level. And it doesn't mean, like Rolando said, a slow sinking jerkbait is still just as valuable, if not more valuable, than a suspending bait. So don't be afraid to let a bait fall. But it seems like there's something about keeping it on their level or above them mostly that makes a big difference. And I think if you can discipline yourself as an angler to do that while you're fishing a jerkbait, whether you're visualizing it with your mind, is it above the target or the fish that I'm going for, or looking at it on your live sonar. That's a big one that just seems to be a pretty good constant from my experience.
Yep, absolutely. Have to keep it above. That's gonna above them is probably, they just feed up, and I feel like bigger fish kind of so they'll inspect it a little bit more, and if it's underneath them, they almost every single time that I've caught a 8-9 pounder, it's always right above their head, like right.
And isn't
above
that
their
crazy? Because how many crankbaits do we have that definitely go below, and the fish are
Yeah.
definitely like getting it when it's on the
Yep.
bottom, or even diving crankbaits that aren't touching the bottom and they aren't digging. The bass are
Right.
still getting them.
Yeah.
A Rapala DT is just a fish catching machine, and it's not all that different from a jerkbait. But there's something about like a jerkbait fishing, especially when snapping it, they want to be looking up a little bit at it for sure.
Yeah, it is
I
weird
think it's such a visual bait, more so than like a DT10.
It is.
DT10 is just, and that vibration it puts off. I mean, they can feel it so much more, where they have to see that. And come on, man, if you're a fish, a big fat dying minnow.
And now there's so many different variations of a jerkbait too. If you're going back earlier, you're talking about whether you're wrapping around some lead around that front hook or around, weighting the bait back in the day before my time when guys had to weight a jerkbait and whatnot. Now you've got junior size jerkbaits. You've got deep diving jerkbaits. You've got double deep diving jerkbaits. You've got all these variations, and they all work. And it's more fun, and you have more options now than ever to find out what that one is. And especially if we're playing that competition tournament game of these fish are seeing a lot of the same stuff, maybe that one color or that one, that deep diving one that just operates a little bit differently than what those fish have been used to. There's more and more options out there than ever. And I know that Rolando's biting his tongue a little bit, keeping a couple stuff closer to the vest, and I'll blame it all, and I may or may not be too. But do not be afraid to play around with the different sizes and the different depths of them, because getting the bait down 18 inches more than what it would is the difference between getting that fish to activate and bite it when it wouldn't have normally.
Yeah, I would tell you that one of the things is like, clear water, it doesn't matter, because if they'll see it. They'll see it. And if they want to bite it, they'll chase it, and they'll come. I've seen them come from 15, 20 feet.
Way up.
Come skid it, yeah. But when you're dealing with stained water and you're trying to use a jerkbait, you're going to have to put it on them a little bit closer and be more tactical, right, with it. So but that's when you're sinking, you're changing of hooks, weighting it, all that stuff matters more than it does in super clear water. Because in super clear water, you don't necessarily need to get it right on them. They'll chase it and they'll see it from a long distance. That combination of, I like the mega bass because I don't have to. I can just change hooks and I can change what it needs to do. If you go with like a different brand that's super buoyant, changing hooks is not going to do anything. It's still going to suspend. So that's when you got to put lead on it, or you got to do whatever it is. You got to do more to that jerkbait in order for it to do what you want it to do. And but mega bass, if you know what you're doing, just changing hooks out is going to alter quite a bit of what the action's going to be.
And this is why you see people with gram scales weighing treble hooks.
Yeah.
This right here is because you can dial in. And not only can you dial in like the sink rate, but you can dial in how it sinks. You can have it like actually go backwards. You can have it go nose down where it kind of swims its way down.
I don't know. I have a question for Adam. I like to sink mine so normally you have a transfer weight system on the mega bass. So when you cast it, you get that weight in the back, right? It lands, but then when you start jerking it, it's forward. So most of the time I have it's sinking, with the nose down.
Right.
So like I've never experienced. I actually have not experimented with weighing the back where it kind of falls, with the tail end down.
So I guess in a really deep water or a deeper water situation, I could see something like that. But then I think of like that Kredge lure or some of those other lures that are like that. But I feel like the first time you reel, the bill on the bait's gonna give it just enough to where the weight ball transfers again. So I feel like a couple of real turns into it, and you no longer are getting that. but you'd have to like just let it on slack line fall that way, and then theoretically, yeah, it'll fall that. But I've never tried to
Yeah, I've never done it.
present
I always
to
have
bass
it.
in that way.
Yeah, I haven't either. I always use deep divers. Deep diving, I use the long, I don't use the shallow. Because most of the time when I'm using jerk baits, I'm like in 5, 7 foot. So I actually use a deep diving jerk bait a lot. I hardly ever use the shallow jerk bait.
Because a couple real turns and you're already where you want to be. You're not, you're not giving a bunch of just to get it down to your depth.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because over time it's been more. There was a time where, God, it was ridiculous. That jerkbait was working so good. Now it's a little bit harder, but it's still very effective as long as you put it in the right places and you're using the right, situation. I think you mix the wind in it, it's a lot more effective. But there was times when it was even slick water, like it was so effective. That was pre-COVID for me, at least.
okay.
And after COVID, I felt like a ton of people came into the fishing world, and then Patrick Walters exposed it, with the whole fork, and I was like, dang it, and made it, and then everybody started doing it. So now I don't feel it doesn't have the effect that it did before that. But I always carry the jerkbait year round with me. And like I said, I carry the oversized jerkbaits. I carry the big ones too.
You're going to give me confidence to break out the big guy that seems to be collecting dust in my tackle box, especially if I'm heading down to Florida. I'm going to be tempted to give that guy a try.
Man, that's
There's some grass down there. Throw that over.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You got to have the rod for it. And it's situational. It's usually, you definitely need more wind on that one. I feel like that one is a little more obvious. But man, it's a big fish together.
Cool.
Well, guys, we've run about an hour on time. I don't want to overstep my time with you guys. I want to give you a chance to thank your sponsors. Adam, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks to both of you guys. I messaged Kurt earlier today, and I was like, "Who else, is anyone else going to be on the show?" And he said Rolando is going to be on the show. So I was like, "All right, well, that just makes me a student now. I will be listening to what he has to say." I've definitely handed my money over to Rolando plenty of times due to the jerkbait that he's versed at throwing. So thanks for you guys for letting me join y'all tonight. I'll give two kind of obvious thanks, and now I'm going to give a one that you're not expecting thanks. First two, Dugout Bait and Tackle Mary out of Georgia, and Hobie Kayaks. That's where I get my Hobies from. They rig me up down there. If we're on the topic of jerkbait fishing, for me, it's this day and age, it's directly correlated with my live sonar using live scope, and being in a Hobie, specifically a Hobie PA 360, allows me to line up and make those casts, and makes me as a jerkbait fisherman even more effective and more deadly. So literally my kayak is just as much as you heard us talk about rod, reel, line, is just as much of a tool in my jerkbait fishing as anything else. And from what I've heard through the grapevine, I think Rolando would agree. I'm pretty sure you're still in the Hobie, and I'm pretty sure that's still a part of how you do it too. So dug out in that. Now here's what I'm going to throw a weird plug out there. In 1979, there was a movie that was made. It was Steve Martin's first feature role. Does anyone know what it was?
The Jerk, maybe?
That's completely correct, Kurt. And that's one of the greatest movies ever made. It's one of the funniest movies ever made, and it's Steve Martin's first feature role. So if we're talking about jerkbait fishing, I was like, what else? I was like, the Jerk, one of the greatest comedies of all, one of the most hilarious movies of all time. So I don't care if you fish or not. It's important that everyone that listens to this or sees this carves out 90 minutes of their life to go watch The Jerk with Steve Martin. It's an amazing, hilarious movie.
It's worth watching.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Oh yeah, man. I definitely thank you for having us, Smitty, and thank you for the kind words, Adam. I don't have a ton of fun sponsors. I don't fish as much as I used to anymore. I got a little tackle shop here in San Antonio, Outdoor Alphas, that Sam, the owner, helps me out with, getting me rods and reels and whatever he gets in the store. Z Pro, I think is. I'm not sure what Z Pro is doing. I think they're not. I'm not sure if they're going to be sticking around doing the deal. But I heard if they are, I'm gonna try to stick with them. But in the meantime, that's really the only sponsor that I have. Oh, I have J Rod Custom Builds and Repairs. So Jerry builds my rods whenever I want like a special technique rod. Really mainly for the jerkbait rod, because I was so dissatisfied with some of the rods, and he finally found me one that I really liked. So J Rod Custom Builds and Repairs here in San Antonio builds me and fixes all my rods, because I tend to knock those guides out a lot in the kayak. So he's always constantly repairing those for me, and appreciate that. But of course, family and wife, man, I can't do this without having a good support at home, man. It's hard to be able to get away. I mean, this is not life. We're not winning money here that's life changing, right? It's a hobby that we love to do. And occasionally we'll add a few dollars to our pocket here. So definitely have to give a shout out to my wife, Jennifer, and the family. And let's see, what else? I think that's pretty much it. I do mortgage loans. That's how I make my living, guys. So I'm in Texas. I do loans, and I specialize in qualifying people to get their homes, and was an underwriter for 10 years. So if anybody's familiar with doing applying for a home, I was an underwriter for 10 years. So I know the process from A to Z. I'm not just your typical salesman. So
if you're in Texas, look up Rolando.
yeah. But hopefully I can get out more and do a little more fishing here in this next year, and trying to make some of those Bassmaster tournaments coming up. So,
Rolando, are you going to fish Texas Bass Nation Caddo March?
I have to fish Caddo, man. I love Caddo.
I think I'm going to end up down there too. That maybe are you going to do the Bassmaster Florida here in a couple of weeks?
So I'm talking to my buddy of mine about doing Florida. Yes, for the Bassmaster. Yep. Mm-hmm. So we're going to see if we can make it out there. I missed the Havasu, right? Mm-hmm. Out in Arizona, right? That's so couldn't make that one, just work and things. But we love making Florida, and I've made the Florida trip. Right. And a good point, Adam, that you made. The Hobie, the 360, the Live Scope. I mean, that is a deadly combination. Making your Live Scope like work. And I mean, if you're a Live Scope guy, and I went fishing this past weekend on a boat, and I didn't catch a single fish on Live Scope. I went skipping docks with a jig, and we ended up getting third place. So I know a lot of people think I do a lot of Live Scope. I mean, we all grew up fishing without Live Scope. I mean, we're all old enough to know what it is to fish without Live Scope. But if you got the skill to be able to add the Live Scope and add your traditional skills to it, I mean, it just makes you that. It gives you a competitive edge, right? Without a doubt, it's going to try to alter and change your style of fishing. But at the end of the day, you still got to find them, and you got to make them bite. So, but now that's pretty much it on my end, guys. I appreciate you, having us come on, and Hobie. I wish that they still had their league going. I mean, they make some great kayaks.
Yeah, me too. I really miss the Hobie series, man. That really helped round out a season between them and Bass. You could fill, at pretty much any weekend you needed to fill. Thank you guys so much for coming on and giving us some of your knowledge. It's just, I really enjoyed tonight and getting into the details of jerkbait fishing. You guys gave out some juice I wasn't quite expecting. So that was awesome, man. And our listeners, please like, share, and tell your friends about the podcast, and we will see you next week.
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a good one. Thanks, Adam. Thanks Smitty.